Our guest today was born and raised in Wausau, Wisconsin. He is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin and earned his law degree there. He is also a Kennedy School of Government scholar. Mayor Daley calls him, and I quote, "a valued partner in making Chicago the best that it can be," unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome back to the City Club of Chicago the Alderman of the 42nd Ward, Alderman Burton Natarus. Your Honor.
I'd like to take the liberty of introducing my son, Michael Natarus, a businessman. Michael, stand up. The speaker should never apologize, but I got to apologize a little bit. I'm a little bit under the weather, and so I'm not really in a position to, break it out or shout it out, but I'll try to give you the best that I can. I look over the audience, and I see that the people who are interested in planning and the people who are interested in government are here. I just wished some of the neighbors were here that hate the government so much and hate what we're doing. I wish they were here to listen to some of the things that I have to say, because we really try to be responsive to neighborhood groups, and we try to do it in a way that we know that we're not going to get into difficulty with our legal system. Many years ago, there was a very interesting movie. It was called Dr. Zhivago, and Sir Ralph Richardson was in there, and Omar Sharif and Julie Christie, and they were coming home in the wintertime to Moscow from their dacha, and they arrived at their house, and Sir Ralph Richardson was rather well noted in society. He was a physician, and he walked into the house, and there were some people there. And they had big babushkas on, and they had big fur hats, and they said, "You can use the living room. Your neighbors are throughout the rest of the house, and they're sharing the different rooms." And they were very shocked. And they said, "Well, there's a new government now, and the government owns all of the property, and we're dividing it up. And so this is your room. And the neighbors have had an election. The local commissar had an election, and they've divided your house, and they're all sharing the value of your house." And I use that as an example because people today have the idea that we don't have a private property system, and they don't really seem to care until their own private property is infringed upon. And I don't know if you know this or not, but all of our public officials take an oath of office, and I don't want to be corny, but we take an oath of office which says that we're supposed to support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Illinois, and its laws. And so many of the things that we do and many of our actions are based upon what we perceive the law to be or what it will be. Now, maybe an alderman shouldn't be a lawyer. Maybe that's the big problem. Because then you don't have to worry about the law, and you don't have to study about the law, and who cares about the law? And I say, what would we do in this country if we didn't know something about the law? And I know we represent people. I know we're a government of men and women, but we also do have a frame of law that keeps us together. Now, people don't seem to understand that we have a United States Constitution that has a Fifth Amendment in it. Now, the Fifth Amendment, every time you hear about it, has to do with criminal cases, He took the Fifth, she took the Fifth, that one took the Fifth, having to do with self-discrimination. But they don't read the second line, which says that government can't take property and reduce its value without paying just compensation. That's been on the books of the Constitution since 1791. Then if you read the state constitution, it even elaborates on it. It talks about eminent domain, it talks about takings. In fact, there's well, I can't find, here it is. There's a professor from the University of Chicago who wrote a book in 1985 called Takings. Takings. How the government will destroy or reduce the value of property, and it's called a taking, and the fact that the government has to pay money or damages. Now, the courts have said for a long, long time that it's not only eminent domain, but it's also what they call inverse condemnation. In other words, inverse condemnation means if they pass a law and you reduce the value of someone's property, that can also be construed to be a taking, and you have to pay damages. Now, why do I bring this point up? I bring this point up because people ask me every day, why don't you pass a law reducing the zoning on that piece of property? And I don't do that. I don't do that because when I introduce the law, it's under the color of law, because I'm a government official. And that means it's a taking if we don't do it properly. Now, that's why you ask all of the developers who will tell you that when you come into my office and you and you want to rezone your property, you have to do it. I won't sponsor it. Now, there are some exceptions. For example, if it's for a school, sometimes if it's a church, not always, sometimes. If it's some kind of government agency, I'll introduce and I'll sponsor the ordinance. So will Mayor Daley. Now, there are other exceptions. For example, if we were going to take the entire city of Chicago, or we were going to take a substantial piece of land and rezone it, I don't have any problem with that after I check it out, and I don't have any problem with that type of government action because that's a planning measure. And the courts have always said that there's a distinction with regard to planning and a public purpose. Now, in there's a coalition, for example, on the near north side that calls itself the Coalition to Save the Gold Coast. Well, that's okay. If I was going to try to provoke people and everything like that, I guess I would use that kind of smack language, too, of saving the Gold Coast. But the point of the matter is I worked with a neighborhood organization in 1978, and we saved the Gold Coast in 1978 by downzoning all of it to R5. And I think that was enough to, I don't think a single high-rise went up of any magnitude. There are a couple of exceptions north of Division Street or even down to Oak Street in that brownstone area, and they were all saved. We later, 3 or 4 years ago, passed another ordinance putting a height limitation on it of 45 feet, and then everybody wanted to know why we made an alternative measurement, and it was because the people insisted on it. We were going by floors, 4 floors, 5 floors, 6 floors as an alternative, because there were a number of houses that would have been illegal. Why? Because some of the houses had high ceilings, and so we took that into account. And I think that whole process has been sustained. Now, this is a beautiful city. And I think Mayor Daley has had an awful lot to do with it. I call Mayor Daley the master architect. Not that I'm trying to get in good with Mayor Daley. Who knows if I'm in good with Mayor Daley or not, especially since he's off to India and he can't hear me. But the point of the matter is, this mayor, whether you like his politics or not, is really, truly dedicated to Chicago. And he and his family have had a wonderful, beautiful touch to it. Now, if you walk down the street, I have a habit. I like to walk down the street, and I like to watch people. And you see all these people coming in from foreign countries, and they're looking like this, you know. And you tap them on the shoulder, and everybody says, well, I'm from Japan, or I'm from Holland, or I'm from New York even. And they say, this is a beautiful city. And I ask you, what other city in the United States has a more beautiful downtown? Now, I know that the aldermen, particularly that live in the outer skirts, in some of the poorer areas will say, well, you invest all of the money in downtown. Well, we have to. That's the picture. This is what most people see, and we try to be equitable in trying to solve some of the outlying district problems too, because we have an honest effort to do that. And we have an aldermanic menu program where every alderman is allowed to spend so much money in their ward and to make repairs. But there's no doubt about it. Now, I've traveled around a little bit. I just came back from a Harvard seminar in Long Beach, California. And, it goes to show that development works like an accordion. It's like an accordion. You'll go in, and now we're going in. Why? Because we're building our central city. Other cities are having other troubles. They're expanding, and it's called urban sprawl. Now, you go to all of these seminars in which the western cities, or even some of the southwest and southeast cities, and representatives of the government are there, they'll tell you, hey, what are we going to do to stop the sprawl? The sprawl. Go to California and take the coastal highway from LA down to San Diego. What a mess. What a mess between the oil tanks and the harbors and the buildings, and it goes on and on and on. And they don't have a beautiful center. And they don't have, the high-rise buildings. Now, everybody today is complaining about high-rise buildings, but I submit to you one of the most beautiful sights in the world with respect to Chicago is driving in from O'Hare, or even driving in from the south. Take a look at that skyline. Can you match it anywhere in the world? I don't care even if you're in London or Paris. Can you match that anywhere in the world? Chicago invented the skyscraper. And we have a building that we landmarked downtown. It was one of the first skyscrapers called the Reliance Building. And these are tall, narrow spires, and they're absolutely beautiful. Now, should we have nothing but that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. One of the advantages of having a tall spire like that is then you can negotiate for open space. If you don't obtain your some of the high rises, you don't have a narrow spire, then you're going to end up with a big box, and it'll go lot line to lot line, and you won't have any open space. But of course, Daley's shrewd now. What he's doing is requiring the big boxes to have gardens on top. So we'll have open space that way, provided we have a waterproof membrane. And so, right. So I'm just saying we have an awful lot to be thankful for. Another example about development is I went to the Historic Landmark Preservation meeting last year, and they said, you going to a preservation meeting? A guy like you. So I go to Cleveland. And we had it in downtown Cleveland at the Renaissance Hotel. Have you ever been to downtown Cleveland? Downtown Cleveland is 6 blocks square. You walk out of that hotel, and you may walk down to the lake and see the rock and roll. They have a wonderful Roy Orbison collection, if you like Roy Orbison. I walked away with about 6 discs. And but they have the rock and roll, and they have the stadiums down there. And then the interesting part is they asked us to go on a preservation tour. Where do you think they took us? Shaker Heights. Shaker Heights. They took us out to the suburbs to see the buildings that were preserved. They don't have a central downtown. And when you ride in Cleveland from Shaker Heights downtown, it's like bombed out Berlin. It's like bombed out Berlin. Nobody wants to build those buildings. And you have to ask yourself why. The only thing that's saving them is they have a very top-grade medical center there. They have one of the finest hospitals in the world there, and that's the only thing that's saving them in terms of downtown. Detroit. What can I tell you about Detroit? Go to the closest thing to any kind of development is New York. And we went there last year, or maybe, when was it, 18 months ago? When did we go to New York? We went to New York because we wanted to find out how great they were. And we wanted to find out why they weren't able to pass a new zoning ordinance. And there were 2 reasons that I came up with. Maybe some other people that went there came with a different conclusion. Number one, the real estate board was you're nice guys, but the real estate board was too tough. And the other thing is, when they went through reform in New York, they gave official government status to neighborhood groups. And every one of the neighborhood groups were arguing for their own turf, and they couldn't get anything passed. And what happened was the politicians, the government officials, walked away from it. They didn't have the power. The neighborhood groups had the vote. And all the city council could do was concur. And so I say to you, that's a good way. We have democracy, but it's a good way to have government break down. So I think we have a pretty good system here. We listen to neighborhood groups. We evaluate what they say. We give them input and everything else, but we still have to make the decision. And I happen to believe that in all of these disputes that we go through, everything is negotiable. Everything is negotiable. And if everything isn't negotiable, then I think you're not gonna achieve what you have to achieve. Now, I have to say to you that the city of Chicago does engage in planning. Now, the first big plan that we ever had was this. This is the Burton plan. You ever read it? I have a lot of people that quote from it about, you've got to make big plans. You all have to make big plans. But they haven't read the rest of the book. You know. And this is a very fine book to read. And he compares Chicago, believe it or not, he compares Chicago to many of the European cities, and he would like to have Chicago become one of the great European cities. Now, why is Chicago great? Well, one of the reasons it's great is because of geography. First of all, in the olden days, it was in the center of the United States. Every railroad track in the city, every railroad track in the country went through Chicago. It still does. Every railroad. We then became the real industrial center, whether it be cattle, whether it be horses, whether it be manufacturing, whatever type of manufacturing you're talking about, it took place in Chicago. We also became the exact center of the world. And that's how O'Hare Field really developed. Everybody flew in here and they could go somewhere else. And I think, I've been in a couple of airports, and I like O'Hare. I think O'Hare is great, especially this idea of the double concourse that United has. And as a result of that double concourse where you go under the tunnel and you hear the zany music and the flashing lights, ding, 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 and all that stuff. Well, anyhow, when you go to the second level, it means they can bring more planes in and out. And I've been to some of those other airports, and some of those airports are really a schlep. And you talk about these little go-karts and things like that, you really have to walk. You walk, you walk, you walk, you walk. Finally you get there, and it's a good thing they have a chair for you to sit down. So and the expansion of O'Hare Field is absolutely essential, and I'm glad Daley worked it out. And I felt really good when I was sitting in that hangar a few months ago, and when they announced this, and the fellow, I can't remember his name, and I should. I think he was the George Washington of Illinois. There was a fellow from down in Carbondale who got up and says, listen, I live near St. Louis, but I'm a citizen of Illinois, and whatever happens in Chicago is meaningful to me, and that's why I'm supporting the expansion plan. I forgot his name, but we ought to write it down and put in a plaque out there or something, because, and I apologize for not remembering the name, but he was the guy from Carbondale. And I thought that was one of the most sophisticated, insightful statements that I've heard from a long, long time. Now, we are going through a planning stage. And people say to me, well, that's fine. Why don't you let me in on it? Well, I think you should be in on it, but the point of the matter is, if you're going to get anything done, you got to go through a thinking process. And we have this zoning reform commission, which unfortunately I've been appointed to. Why, I don't know. I don't know why I was appointed to it, because I'm arguing every day. Stone and I sit there and argue, but we make points. The point is we meet quite often, and we meet for 2-hour sessions, and we go on and on and on. We've already had a series of hearings around the city, and we're going to soon, I can say this, right? You don't care? We're going to come out with a written document for the whole city soon. And then we have to go through remapping. And the way I think we're doing it is, even if there's a case, there's a test case. Who said what? Did I hear somebody? Did you boo?
No,
Oh.
somebody sneezed.
Oh, excuse me, Gesundheit. I think the way we're doing it is going to meet we're going to have a legal test. You know that. You know somebody's, I'm sorry you didn't like what I said, goodbye. We're going to have a legal test, and I think the process that we're using is good. Now, when we have a document to look at, and when we start with the maps, then we're going to go around the whole city, and we will have hearings all over the city, and people can criticize it. And we will listen. And as a result of the first round, we received an awful lot of criticism of what's going on in the city, and we put it into the ordinance. Now we'll try it again. Now, we are going about this in a very scientific way. I don't know if you know this or not, but we have a photograph now of every building in the city of Chicago. Now, this is not CIA, but we have a photograph of every building in the city of Chicago, and so does the assessor. And so that's cut down on the time. Now, it took Chaddock. Harry Chaddock was one of the writers of this, and it took him 7 years to do it, and we're going to be doing, I think, about 2 or 3. And I think we're going to. Alicia, he's leaving. Would you have a fight? Where are you going, Brian? That's your wife up there. Say goodbye. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I get that way. People embarrass me all the time, so, you know. Anyhow, we think, and we're also making it very, very readable. And I think it's very, very important for people to understand the meaning of zoning as opposed to the meaning of plans. Now, what is a plan? A plan is an idea. A plan is a concept. Can you change a plan? Absolutely. Can you deviate from a plan? Absolutely. It's an idea. It's a concept. We have a plan for the central area. I'm going to leave a few here. If you want to grab them, we can get more. And we're really getting zany. We worked on this for a long time. This is the central area plan, a summary of it with a disc. So I'll put them down here, Jay. They can grab you for them. Okay? Now that's a plan. Well, take it home and write a book, Paul. Write a book, Paul. It's a plan. And we sent this out to some of the neighborhood groups, and they said, we don't like it. I said, why don't you like it? It's too general. It is. It's an idea. It's a concept. It's a plan. It's not an ordinance. Now, when you become more specific, then you get into what we call zoning, and it becomes a matter of law in terms of things that are specific. Now, some people have said to me, we want to have the ability to tell Walgreens not to be here. I said, I can't do that. And we don't want 2 Walgreens on one block. Can't do that. Why? The law says you can't do that. You can't regulate businesses by name. You got to show that it'll have a deleterious effect, you know. And so yeah, that's one of the big problems. Some people want to have the planning or even the zoning so specific that there'll be a church here, there'll be a Walgreens here, there'll be a Penny's here, there'll be a Nordstrom's here, there'll be maybe a saloon there, and you can't do that. You can't do that. When you do that, you're really trampling on people's private rights. That is to say, you know, we're still a capitalistic country. We still believe in competition. We believe in capitalism. We believe in economy. And the zoning is allowed by the courts because we have what we call the police power. Now, what is the police power? The police power has to do with health, welfare, and safety. And that's why we have enacted what we call a zoning ordinance. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but Chicago was very, very famous. In 1923, our zoning ordinance was touted around the United States by no one else but Herbert Hoover. And then in 1923, Herbert Hoover was the Secretary of Commerce. He touted us. He said that we were doing a good job in Chicago in terms of planning. And since 1923, we've amended the zoning ordinance in 1947, and then in 1957, and now we're amending it again, we hope, within the next year or so. Now, what else do I have to show you? What are you saying? Hey, Chester, you have a contract with the city. It's terminated. All right, this is our zoning ordinance. This is the 57 ordinance. It's been amended, and now we're working on our new one. Now, for your information, and we can pass these out, and, you know, they say we don't notify people. This zoning ordinance is now on the web. And you can find out the zoning of your property and your neighbor's property, and you can find out what they're being taxed, you know, to further aggravate you. The guy next door isn't being taxed as much as me. And here, I got a sheet of paper, and maybe you can, I don't know if there's enough to go around, but if you want to write this down, I'll go real slow. This is the zoning map website, internet, http:/. You don't want me to read it, huh? Okay. There it is.
Maybe you can put it on the City Club website.
Yeah, put it on the City Club website. That's a good idea. Now,
You have a license for all these things you're talking here?
huh?
You have a license for all of this?
Do I criticize you about your classes? Now, where do we go? Where do we go from here once we get a new zoning ordinance? By the way, one of the things that I'm proud of, and I pushed for this, asked them, I drove them crazy. We have a new zoning classification called transportation. A transportation classification. Why? Well, I firmly believe that if we were to take the railroad tracks, and I got this idea from somebody else, and it's not my original idea. I got this idea from somebody else, and he gave me the idea, and I've been pushing for it because I think it's a great idea. We should build a transportation system in this city on the railroad tracks that are already existing. Now, if you stand on a high-rise building and you look down at a high-rise building, if you want to know the name of the guy, ask Betty. She'll tell you back there. Tell him who it is. Walter. Walter gave me the idea, right? Didn't he? Walter's a rich man that travels around the world looking at trains. That's where I got the idea from. And anyhow, if we would build a mass transit system on our existing railroad tracks, you would see this city expand. And by setting up these transportation districts, we will preserve the ground around it so that, for example, if you have a train going on one of the railroad tracks, you know what will happen? People will build around it. Stores will build around it. Not maybe houses because there's a little noise or something, but you'll see this city expand. And that's a big, I happen to know, for example, there's a track between O'Hare Field, Midway, and Gary. What if we built a high-street train between O'Hare, Midway, and Gary? Wouldn't that be wonderful? Gary could be the international airport or something, or maybe the baggage airport or the freight airport, whatever have you. But that's another reason why we want to get this regional transportation task force, which I've been appointed to, off the ground for Illinois, and then we'll be able to advise not Alderman, yeah, he was an alderman, Congressman Lipinski. They all start out as an alderman. But anyhow, Congressman Lipinski, originally he was in the Park District, but it's Congressman Lipinski is going to be using this, he's the chairman. Am I going too long, right? Don't forget that at election time when I give you the materials. Yeah. Chester, are you back? Yeah, okay. That Chester's a transportation king. Anyhow, we're if we can get that going, then you see, once we get that going, I think there'll be enough of an expansion in terms of transportation. We might even be able to reduce the fare down to $1 if we get the volume, and then maybe we can start limiting the use of the automobile. I don't see how we can limit the use of the automobile now at this present time, because if you look at the other cities, they don't have traffic. Now, you need traffic to have commerce. Not only automobile traffic, you need pedestrian traffic, and that's one of the things we're working on in the zoning ordinance, to widen sidewalks. That's a big ingredient in the zoning ordinance, to widen sidewalks, so we provide that for pedestrians. Because if you don't have the pedestrians, we can be very proud of the fact that on Salzman's turf, he owns it, Michigan Avenue, on a Saturday night there are 2,000 or 3,000 people walking down the street window shopping. It's a wonderful sight, but some people don't like it because it interferes with their living. If we can do that, then we can start limiting the parking and what have you. By the way, if you would like to know, and this is a fact, why Michigan Avenue is more successful than State Street is the fact in Michigan Avenue there's parking. State Street, there's very little parking downtown at a reasonable price. And the only reasonable price that you have downtown with regard to parking is the Grand Park garage. That's why the building of Block 37 is very, very important, because I think if we have the right concept down at Block 37, we'll bring the loop back in greater form that it is. Now, one last comment about why development is important in this town, and that is this. Oh, I got to tell you another one. I brought you all a souvenir, and I want you all to be a judge. I want you all to be a judge as to whether or not in Chicago there's enough for everybody. I want you to put this above your bed, and this is in 1910, a picture was taken at Dearborn and Madison. And it shows you transportation, mass transit, and everything else. I want everybody to have this. Next time somebody says to you, we have too much traffic, take a look at this.
After he'll autograph it.
That was taken in 1910. Traffic situation? Woo-hoo! So I think we've made improvement in the traffic situation. I think what I'm probably saying to you is I think we need traffic, but I think we have to control it so we don't have congestion. Congestion is bad, traffic is good. Now, finally, and in conclusion, I must say to you, in 1987, I had the shock of my life. I was really running scared. I had supported Harold Washington, and Harold Washington had the unfortunate situation of having the federal government take away revenue sharing. And that was over $100 million. They just took it right out of the city budget. And we weren't able to, you can go around, you can fire people. We weren't able to make up $100 million. And we We got it down to 87. And then we came up with the idea, and the airlines hated us, we came up with an airline fuel tax. And then we imposed a city fuel tax, a motor fuel tax, a small one. It isn't much, but it's small. And everybody said everybody would buy their gas outside of Chicago. Maybe they did. And so we had a vote on a tax rate increase. And I don't know how it happened, and I blame Dick Mill. Because Dick Mill ran behind the press, and he says, here's the swing vote, here's the swing vote. I voted with Washington, and then he was able to break the tie, and we raised taxes. And my constituents just rolled my back off, you know. And I don't know whether they were against the situation because they didn't like Harold, or I don't know whether or not they didn't want the taxes. Now, why did I say that? I said that because we have not raised that rate since 1987. We just passed a budget, we just passed a tax levy, and we have not raised the rate. So people say to me, how come our taxes are going up? It's because the assessed valuation is going up on your property. I don't know if you know this or not. Residences are taxed at 16% in Chicago. Residents are taxed in DuPage County 33 1/3%. One of the reasons we're losing industry is the fact that we tax industry at 38%, and we tax commercial at 33 1/3%. Now, why do people hate the property tax? They hate the property tax because everybody practically has to pay it. And the seniors really take a hit. Pensioners really take a hit. But there are exemptions and there are relief measures in that ordinance. The other reason people don't like it is it's 2 payments a year. And the reason it's 2 payments a year is because that's what they were able to work out as a result of the, I don't know if you know, in the Depression of the 1920s and the 30s, everybody was paying, there was no money, everybody was paying everything in script, which was fake money, like Monopoly. And as a result, the tax collections are for last year. In other words, you're getting last year's bill now. And they would never have been able to turn it around. George Dunn tried to turn it around by having monthly payments and things like that. He was never able to get it passed. And so that's another reason people don't like it. Now, the corporations don't like it. And I like corporations. They're business people. They don't like it because they have to pay too. Now, one of the things, we did a study and we found out with regard to the federal income tax and even the state income tax, there are many corporations that don't pay it. Why? Because there's a lot of perks and there's a lot of deductions. And you don't get that in the real estate property tax. There aren't any deductions. The only deduction you get is if you pay real estate property taxes, it's a deduction off your federal and your state. And so they don't like it. And there's also a theory among businessmen, and I'm not trying to talk out of turn, but you know it's true. There are some businessmen who don't feel corporations should be taxed at all on anything because they think a corporation isn't a citizen or isn't a person. And they regard it, there's a theory about that. They regard it as double taxation. So what happened was this. What were we going to do, to keep the property tax up, the base large? Well, when I first became an alderman, there wasn't Water Tower Place. Jerry Wolper was suffering from floods. He was trying to erect the Hancock building, and we told him, you're going to hit water, and he did. And the Water Tower Place was fences. It was owned by the Seagram's family, and they had canvas over it, and they played tennis in the back of it. And then on where the Pearson, 180 East Pearson is, that used to be the Pearson Hotel, where you got sort of a half and half English meal, And I tried it once. That was it. But anyhow, then we had a state representative who had a boarding house or sort of a house next door to the west. His name was Joe Delacour, who lived there on that street. It was an altogether different thing. None of the buildings were up. 900 wasn't up. None of the buildings up. And so we went out and we started building buildings on Michigan Avenue. And we started building high-rises. And I have to tell you in all due candor, this ward, this area, carries the rest of the city financially. This is the economic engine of the city of Chicago, and if it wasn't for it, I think your taxes would go up even higher. And now we are faced with the problem, and I am concluding now, we are faced with a very serious problem, and that is this. Up goes the high-rise building, person comes into the apartment, asks the person when they look out the window, the real estate broker, are they going to build anything next door? The broker says, no, they're not going to build anything next door. 6 months later, there's a building there. And people are sore. Why? Because you're blocking the view. And a lot of the traffic problems that you're hearing from people and the density problems that you're hearing from people really come down to the fact that people don't want their views blocked. That's what it's all about. If you look to the east, at many of the buildings, and are very well kept up, some of these people have very, very fancy apartments where they have a window in the front and a window in the back, and there aren't any windows on the side. And they've been living there for years, you see. Now, I'm not saying I'm a hero. I had a townhouse, and I looked out the window, and all I saw was a brick wall. So they say, why did you move there? I said, I didn't care. I didn't care. This was my house. But that's really what it's all about, and I don't know what we can do about that. But on the other hand, they are voters, they are constituents, and we are going to try to do something about it. And you'll see that in the remapping that's coming up. She left. She must have been mad. Oh, I know, she's going to the Plan Commission meeting, which I'm late for. Anyhow, so that's the problem that we face, and we are going to go through some mapping, and you're going to be very pleasantly surprised. You're going to be very pleasantly surprised at this new zoning ordinance that's coming out, and you're going to be very pleasantly surprised at some of the remapping we're going to be going through. And one of the things we are going to try to do is we're going to try to stop canyonization. It's going to be tough, but we're going to try to do it, and we are working on it. So the people who want to protect your views, it's not that we're not listening to you. It's just that we want you to be truthful about it as what the real reason is. For example, there's a building that was built that I was very much opposed to, a very tall building, okay? And it replaced the City of Chicago parking garage, which created more traffic than anything else. These people are complaining about traffic and everything else, and they said, well, why? I wanted another developer who was going to build a smaller building, but I didn't win. I don't always win. Anyhow, so we extracted something from the developer who built the tall building. What was it? We made him build a new park. That was a trade-off. And so we happened. Again, I could really go on, and I don't really want to. I think you want to because...
You can take 2 or 3 questions real fast.
No, wait, I want to end it. I've enjoyed talking with you.
You've been more interested than Jimmy Durante.
No, wait a minute. I've enjoyed talking with you. I just want you to know that we do listen, we do evaluate, but one of the things that people don't like about me, and now don't take this the wrong way, I was not elected to be a parrot. I was not elected to be a parrot. I listen to people, but I don't necessarily go along with the crowd. I have to listen to people and use that as a part of the judgment that I make. And I have to use my experience, because I'll tell you what, this is the last statement. In 1985, we passed a huge planning mechanism on the east side of this ward. And what happened was the neighbors wanted it very, very badly. And I went along with the neighbors. Now it turns out that they don't want it, and they don't like it, and they want it to be less dense. But it's pretty hard to change the law, because what happens is you acquire rights under that. So they think that you can just go in and change it once it becomes the law. And that shows you that if you take a large area, think in terms of whether you want a plan so you can change it, or think in terms of whether you have an ordinance where you're very, very rigid. Thank you.
If
answers one or two questions real fast. The alderman will be limited to 30 seconds for his answers. So come up here and by the way, it's just a record. I never thought I'd ever be at a city club meeting where Joe DeLacour's name was mentioned. That is a first.
Who?
DeLacour, the fellow you mentioned.
Yeah, he was a state rep.
The history of, there's a book on him. No questions, eh? Okay, get to the microphone. Oh, stand up and yell. Go ahead.
2 questions.
What's your name first?
She's a CEO of the New Century Bank, which is a very nice-looking structure that you see when you drive up the Ontario Street ramp. It's a beautiful building.
And what's your second question?
First of all, why is the city mandating guest parking availability in the new buildings? I mean, it seems to me that's part of your congestion and part of the issues.
Well-
And I know the developers find that to be an unprofitable element, but nevertheless, it seems to make sense.
No, that's not what the real problem is. The planners want to reduce parking. That's the university planning concepts. They don't want parking, they want less and less parking. And this is one of the things that we're arguing about. We tell them people want guest parking and we should have it. But here's the nib. You see, it all has to do with the concept of what we call FAR, meaning the size and height of the building. Okay, parking doesn't count toward the FAR. And so the city is saying, some people in the city, is if you want to put in the extra parking, fine. But we're going to count it against your FAR. And that's what they don't like.
Okay, one more question. Go to the microphone so we can all hear you. This is to close. We'll be out of here, well, hopefully at 1:30.
Just a quick question. I'm a resident of 2 East Oak and wanted to find out, where are you planning on putting increased parking within the Gold Coast, within a maybe quarter-mile circumference
Well, I have been working.
that area?
Look, first of all, there's not going to be a high-rise at the Ogden School. Forget it, will you please? This has been going around and this and that. It all emanated from the fact that we were thinking about how to finance schools, and somebody, I think, took a diagram away from us or something. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do with the Ogden School. I've been trying to get the Scottish Rite to put parking on that empty lot. They don't want to do it. They don't want to do it because they're not for profit, and they'd have to set up a separate corporation, and they would be taxed on that. And I don't think they want to do it. But I would love to have that as a surface parking lot. That would solve our Rush Street parking problems immensely.
Alderman, here is a City Club mug. I believe you now have a complete set.
Yeah.
Here is your membership to the
Yeah.
City Club for 1 year. I think you have a bunch of those.
Yeah.
By the way,